plans to himself a joy. Shall this winged life destroy? He that kisses joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise.
Brian James Patrick Doyle of New York was cheerfully not the great Canadian novelist Brian Doyle, nor the astrophysicist Brian Doyle, nor the former Yankee baseball player Brian Doyle, nor that terrific actor Brian Doyle Murray. He was, let's say, the ambling, shambling Oregon writer Brian Doyle, and happy to have been so.
I was the fourth of 6 children born into a very Catholic family. To grow up Catholic is to be especially lucky as an artist, because you are soaked in miracle and mystery and symbol and smoke, and the confident assertion that every moment is pregnant with miracle and possibility and stuffed with holiness like a turducken. It's illogical, unreasonable, unthinkable, unprovable, countercultural, and in direct defiance of all evidence and human history. Isn't that great? I did not actively think about my name until 3rd grade. One day, Sister Marie Amy asked us to file into the dimly lit library room and research the saint for whom we had been named. Listed under B were Barnabas, Barry, Bartholomew, Basil, Bathildus, Bede the Venerable, 3 Benedicts, Benjamin, Berard, Bernard, Bernardino, Bertrand, Brendan, and Bruno, but no Brian. Where is St. Brian? I asked the librarian.
There is no Saint Brian.
I went home in tears. I walked home from the school named for St. John Vianney to my home where my brothers Kevin, Peter, and Thomas were named for saints. My sister Elizabeth was named for a saint, and my father James was named for a saint. I stuttered the tale to my mother, who did not smile, for which I thank her still.
I was not named for a saint, she said.
This made me stop crying. Who were you named for then?
For my mother. Their names were Ethel.
Who was I named for?
You, my little frog, were named for a king. King Brian Boru, the first High King of Ireland. He united the clans and was the first to take up residence at Tara, the Hill of the Kings.
As a boy, as now, I was prone to visions. And I remember the vision of swirling winds and cloaks I had then, of Brian, the young king, on the ramparts of his castle, of swords ringing and hooves clattering, poetry chanted in the hallways, etc. But later, I discovered that Brian Boru's kingship was of a few thousand savages thrashing about in the mud, and that his reign lasted until he was reportedly beheaded by his brothers. I kept a sharp eye on my brothers after that. After I graduated 100 years ago, I had a conversation with my father that I remember vividly.
Now that you're fully educated, said my quiet father one summer day, what are you going to do?
I'm going to be a writer, I said confidently.
That's great, said my father, who is a fine writer. Want some advice? Get a job, learn to type, read like a fiend, and learn to be quiet.
Thanks, I said, puzzled. Flip, silently dismissive. Pause.
Did you write today? He asked suddenly.
Well, no. I played basketball and...
Then you're not going to be a writer.
Oh, I thought he was cruel and dismissive himself that day, and I was hurt. Clearly, he didn't see my talent, my potential, my drive. But he was right, and wise, and even gentle. He was telling me the truth in his quiet, direct, honest way, which is the way he loves. He was telling me that a fine writer writes all the time, thinks about writing, thinks like a writer, dreams stories, sees stories, smells them, is spinning stories in his head all the time, has snatches of stories in his head all the time, has snatches of stories in his pockets, tells stories, collects stories, is alert to stories, is always itching to get to a typewriter and start to shape those stories. Because maybe this story will sing, and maybe if I work hard enough, it'll pour out straight and true and strong, and it'll matter. It'll change things. It'll hit people in the heart. It'll make them cry. Change the way someone acts. Stop a man from cracking his son across the face. Give a moment of quivering tranquility to a woman in despair. Make a girl laugh. You never know.
Thesis. The essay is the widest, fattest, most generous, open, glorious, honest, endlessly expandable form of committing prose, not only because it cheerfully steals and hones from all the other tools and talents of all other forms of art, and not only because it is admirably and brilliantly closest to not only the speaking voice, but the maundering, shambling, shuffling, nutty, rambling, salty, singing voices in our heads, but because it is the most playful of forms, liable to hilarity and free association and startlement, without the filters and mannered disguises and stiff dignity of fiction and poetry and journalism, respectively, would discuss.
My daughter, age 6, sleeps with her bear, also age 6. My son, age 3, sleeps with his basketball and his stuffed tiger, age unknown. My other son, also age 3, sleeps with a can of anchovy fillets. King Oscar brand, caught off Morocco, distributed by the H.J. Nosaki Company in New York. He sleeps with a can every night. Won't go to sleep without it under his right cheek. The can is bright red and features a drawing of King Oscar, an avuncular, bearded fellow, apparently a benevolent despot. Every night after Liam goes to sleep, I gently delete the can from his grip and examine it. It's a roll key can, 56 grams, with, quote, about 6 fillets, 15 grams, unquote. Other than the friendly visage of King Oscar, my favorite thing about the can is about, a rare concession in this corporate world to ambiguity. I suppose it's a legal thing, but still, it pleases me for murky reasons. As I sit here in the dark, I ponder other murky things like, what's the deal with this boy and these anchovies? And How is it that we are drawn to the odd thing we love? How came these anchovies from Morocco swimming headless under the cheek of my son in Oregon? What do we actually know about anchovies, aside from their savory saltiness? What do we actually know about any creature, including, and most important of all, ourselves? And how is it that, though we know painfully little about anything, we manage world-wrenching hubris about our wisdom? Consider the 6 animals in the can, members of the family Ingraulidae, ranging in size from the Brazilian anchovy the size of your thumbnail to the ravenous New Guinea anchovy as long as your forearm. Anchovies don't survive very long in captivity. They don't survive very long after being netted, so we know very little about them. But the little we know is riveting.
Their hearing is perhaps the sharpest of any marine animal, and the frequency they hear best is eerily exactly the frequency of the tail beats of other fish. Is their unimaginably crisp hearing how they manage to swim in darting collectives that twist as one astonishing creature?
We
don't know. Their noses contain a sensory organ that can be found in no other creature in the world. What's it for?
No one knows.
Sensory complexes in anchovies' heads also form dense nets in their cheeks. What do these nets do?
A puzzle. Anchovies get their food by dragging their open mouths through the ocean in mammoth schools. But what exactly do they eat? Surprise.
No one knows.
Among the species of anchovies are, to the delight of meditative fathers sitting in the dark on their son's bed, the buccaneer anchovy, which ranges farthest out into the open ocean, and the saber-tooth anchovy, which has very large teeth and hangs out, understandably, by itself. And I don't even mention the anchovy's cousin, the wolf herring, which grows to be a yard long and has so many teeth, it has teeth on its tongue. Thus, the anchovy clearly as mysterious as, well, this boy sleeping with the fishes. And what do I know irrefutably about my son? A few of his quirks, a bit of his character, his peculiar dietary habits, the lilt of his song, the ache of his sob, where his scars are, the way his hair wants to go, the knock of his knees, and not much else. He is a startling, one-time only boneheaded miracle with a sensory complex in his head and heart that I can only guess at, and dimly try to savor the few brilliant moments I have been given to swim with him. He is a sort of anchovy, as we all are. So I sing our collective salty song, the song of fast, mysterious, open-mouthed creatures swimming in vast schools of our fellows, listening intently, savoring the least of our brethren, and doing our absolute level best to avoid the wolf herring.
We take it for granted that we can connect, that we can speak to each other through headlong sentences on pages and pads, hammered laboriously by a humming man early in the morning in Oregon, and that these sentences travel around the world and shiver some hearts and cause people to laugh and weep and make them feel for a moment like they have a brother who knows how they feel. We take this for granted. It's miraculous, really. It's holy. And I have very little to do with it. I just try as hard as I can to say something real, to tell a story that matters somehow. And then it's off and away on its own.
Early one morning, A group of teachers and staffers at a Connecticut grade school were in a meeting. The meeting had been underway for about 5 minutes when they heard a chilling sound in the hall.
We heard pop, 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 said one of the staffers later.
Most of them dove under the table. That is the reasonable thing to do, what they were trained to do, and that is what they did. But 2 of the staffers jumped or leapt or lunged out of their chairs and ran toward the sound of bullets. Which word you use depends on which news account of that morning you read, but the words all lead in the same direction, toward the bullets.
One of the staffers was the principal. Her name was Dawn. She had 2 daughters. Her husband had proposed to her 5 times before she finally said yes, and they had been married for 10 years. They had a vacation house on a lake. She liked to get down on her knees to paint with little kids in her school.
The other staffer was a school psychologist named Mary. She had 2 daughters. She was a football fan. She had been married for more than 30 years. She and her husband had a cabin on a lake. She loved to go to the theater. She was due to retire in 1 year. She liked to get down on her knees to work in her garden.
Dawn, the principal, told the teachers and staffers to
Lock the door behind them!
and the teachers and staffers did so after Dawn and Mary ran out into the hall.
You and I have been in that hallway. We spent 7 years of our childhood in that hallway. It's friendly and echoing. And if someone opens the door at the end, a breeze comes and flutters the paintings and posters on the wall. Dawn and Mary leapt or jumped or lunged toward the sound of bullets. Every fiber in their bodies descended from millions of years of bodies that have leapt away from danger, must have wanted to dive under that table. That's what they were trained to do. Well, that's how you live to see another day. That's how you stay alive, to paint with the littlest kids, or work in your garden, or hug your daughters, or drive off laughing to your cottage on the lake.
But they leapt for the door, and Dawn said,
Lock the door after us!
and they lunged right for the boy with a rifle.
The next time someone says the word hero to you, you say this. There once were 2 women. One was named Dawn, and the other was named Mary. They both had 2 daughters. They both loved to kneel down to care for small beings. They leapt from their chairs and ran right at the boy with the rifle. And if we ever forget their names, if we ever forget the wind in that hallway, if we ever forget what they did, if we ever forget that there's something in us beyond sense and reason that snarls at death and runs roaring at it to defend children, if we ever forget that all children are our children, then we are fools who have allowed memory to be murdered too. And what good are we then? What good are we then?
Here's one hero in the movies. Here's one hero on a page. Would you know one if you walked beside one on any ordinary day? This one is a protector, someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's sister, someone's 3rd grade teacher who never picked up a gun. And here's one moment on a high wire when we thought we stood on solid ground. Somehow, someone to took off at a dead run and never even once looked down. Now here's one very old question, starting every ordinary day. If we should start to lose it all, who will rise, who will fall, who will run, and who will stay? Now here's one hero as a neighbor, and a memory you know is gonna stay. Waking or sleeping, this one's worth the keeping till all the others blow away.
An essay is very much like a child who you raise slowly, doing the best you can to shape him straight and true and generous and open-hearted. And then away he goes to bring his own wild light to the world. And all you can do is sit at your desk and weep with pleasure at the letters and the messages you get from those whose hearts he hit. There's a great deal else we could say here about the essay, which I think is the coolest of all forms, because it's the closest to our speaking voices, and it's unadorned and unfiltered, and it has none of the prim mannerisms that often afflict other forms. And it's the crucial backbone of memoir and nature writing and spiritual writing. But let's stay with this one point. Isn't it sweet and wild and amazing how sometimes an essay can just completely sizzle your heart and become something you never forget for the rest of your life? Isn't that great? Isn't that, no kidding, holy?
Rules for small twin boys in bathroom.
1, point it down.
2, keep pointing it down.
3, Dad does all the wiping.
4, keep pointing it down even if you are absolutely sure you are done.
5, each boy points his own pointer.
6, if spilling occurs, tell Dad.
7, no washing hands without Dad.
8, no washing anything without Dad.
9, no, you may not pee in the bathtub.
10, yes, you may pee in the bushes outside.
11, no, you may not pee in the car, even if it is parked near the bushes.
12, yes, Dad has a pointer.
13, no, Mom does not have a pointer.
14, no, I don't know where Mom's pointer went.
15, no, I do not know if God has a pointer.
16, yes, if God had a pointer, he would point it down.
17, yes, God could point it down without using his hands.
18, no, I don't know who wipes God. Ask your mother.
I missed one Mass as an altar boy. The Tuesday dawn patrol, 6 a.m. Father Dennis Whelan presiding. He was a good-natured fellow. a cigar smoker, although he was a little young for it. That kind of guy. But he was furious when I trudged back to the sacristy after sitting through the second half of Mass in the very last pew.
Where were you?
I was late, Father.
You miss another, and you're out of the core.
I'm sorry, Father.
Ah, it's no joke to be out there all alone.
Yes, Father. Oh. I knew why he was peeved. I was the key to his famous 22-minute Mass. He pulled off this miracle week after week without ever looking at his watch. His Mass was the most popular, and people came and couldn't wait to come. And the men in New York City that were trying to catch the weekday 6:30 train were especially enamored with it. One time, Whelan had the 6 o'clock on St. Patrick's Day, and we had nearly 50 people in the church. Still a record for our parish, I bet. Oh, working with Whelan was a pleasure. He was a real artist, someone who would have made his mark in any field. He had all the tools: good hands, nimble feet, a sense of drama, a healthy ego, the unnerving itch to be loved that all great performers have. He did not rush his movements, mumble, or edit his work. Oh, he was efficient. Yes, he'd send his right hand out for the chalice as his left was carving a blessing in the air. That sort of thing. But every motion was cleanly executed and held in the air for the proper instant. And he had astounding footwork for such a slab of meat. He was 1 or 2 inches over 6 feet tall, 250 pounds maybe, big belly sliding around in his shirt. Oh, but he was deft on the altar. And he could turn on a dime in the thick red carpet. He cut a memorable double pivot around the corners of the altar table on his way to his spot. And he cut that sucker as cleanly as a professional skater before a Russian judge. I joined the altar boys when I was younger because my older brother was in the corps and because my parents expected it. Also, you could get out of class for funerals. The funerals didn't pay anything. Weddings did, usually $1. Although there were rumors of $5 weddings. And it was said of one boy that he had once received a $20 bill from a bride's father who was drunk. Baptisms didn't pay. A quarter maybe if you were doing twins. The way to make money was to do funerals and work both sides of the altar, selling candles. The large ones were on the left, and the little ones were on the right.
The big ones for horses, the small ones for dogs, said Mr. Torrens, the altar master, with an enigmatic smile.
He was a horse player, I think. People would come up to the candles before and after Mass, and if you were standing there in your uniform, they'd hand you the money, even though the steel box was right in front of them. Small candles were 25 cents and large ones were $1.
Light a big one for me grandmother, they'd say, putting a bill in your hand.
Here's a quarter for my boy at sea.
A quarter for a marriage.
A quarter for the Pope's health.
Two smalls for me intentions.
$1 for the dead.
The code among us was that coins placed in your hand were yours. Bills went into the box. The theory was that we were just standing there, and the women, they were usually women, were handing us money out of the goodness of their hearts. This was the first tickle of sin for some of us. And while the practice enriched some boys, it was by no means universal, partly because our cassocks had no pockets, and partly because Mr. Torrens heard about it from a first-year boy, and after that, he kept a sharp eye on us from the sacristy door. A boy named Frank Rizzo, not the Philadelphia mayor, was asked to leave the Corps because of this, and it caused great embarrassment to his family. He became a bully in adolescence.
And probably still is.
A friend of mine who is a musician says that the reason so much popular music is in 4/4 time is because that is the harmony of the heartbeat. We have a natural rhythm, an interior melody, and he estimates that hominids have been making songs to that beat for maybe 500,000 years. And he further estimates that there have been maybe 100 billion hominids in these last 500,000 years, and that every one of those hominids, male and female, has hummed and sung and warbled songs to that beat. So if you estimate that every man and woman and child of every evolutionary stage along the hominid highway has sung 1,000 songs, which is a totally reasonable guess given that every one of us, whether we can sing or not, sings a song or a snatch of a song every week, then we arrive at a sextillion songs based on the beat of the heart and flung into the holy air by our species and its forebears since we took it upon ourselves to totter up on our back legs some years ago, which is pretty cool. My calculations could be off, and it could be more like a quadradecillion songs, but you get the point.
Consider the hummingbird for a long moment. The hummingbird's heart beats 10 times a second. The hummingbird's heart is the size of a pencil point. The hummingbird's heart is most of the hummingbird. Joias voladares, flying jewels, the first white explorers to the Americas called them. And the white men had never seen such creatures. For hummingbirds came into this world only in the Americas, only here, nowhere else in the universe. More than 300 species whirring and zooming and nectaring in Hummer time zones 9 times removed from ours, their hearts hammering faster than we could clearly hear were our elephantine ears pressed to their infinitesimal chests. Each one visits 1,000 flowers a day. They can dive at 60 miles an hour. They can fly backwards. They can fly more than 500 miles without pausing to rest. But when they do rest, they come close to death. On frigid nights or when they are starving, they retreat into torpor, their metabolic rate slowing to a 15th of its normal sleep rate, their hearts sludging nearly to a halt, barely beating. And if they're not soon warmed, if they don't soon find that which is sweet, their hearts grow cold and they cease to be. Consider for a moment these hummingbirds who did not open their eyes again today, this very day, here in the Americas. The bearded helmet crest and the booted racket tail, the violet-tailed sylph and the violet-capped wood nymph,
Crimson topazes and purple-crowned fairies, red-tailed comets and amethyst wood stars.
The rainbow-bearded thornbills and the glittering-bellied emeralds.
Velvet purple coronets and golden-bellied star frontlets.
fiery-tailed allbills and Andean hill stars.
Spatula tails and puff legs.
Each the most amazing thing you have never seen. Each thunderous wild heart, the size of the tiniest pebble, each mad heart silent. A brilliant music stilled.
Hummingbirds, like all flying birds, but more so, have incredible, enormous, immense, ferocious metabolisms. To drive those metabolisms, they have race car hearts that eat up oxygen at an eye-popping rate. Their hearts are made of thinner, leaner fibers than ours. Their arteries are stiffer and more taut. They have more mitochondria in their heart muscles, anything to gulp more oxygen. Their hearts are stripped to the skin for the war against gravity and inertia, the mad search for food, the insane idea of flight. The price of their ambition is a life closer to death. They have heart attacks and aneurysms and ruptures more so than any living creature. It's expensive to fly. You burn out. You fry the machine. You melt the engine. Every creature on Earth has 2 billion heartbeats to spend in a lifetime. You can spend them slowly, like the tortoise, and live to be 200 years old. Or you can spend them fast, like a hummingbird, and live to be 2 years old.
The biggest heart in the world is inside the blue whale. It weighs more than 7 tons. It's as big as a room. It is a room with 4 chambers. A child can walk around in it, head high, bending only to step through the valves. The valves are as big as swinging doors in the saloon. This house of a heart drives a creature 100 feet long. When this creature is born, it's 20 feet long and weighs 4 tons. It's way bigger than your car. It drinks 100 gallons of milk from its mama every day and gains 200 pounds a day, and when it's 7 or 8 years old, it endures an unimaginable puberty and then essentially disappears from human ken. So very little is known about its mating habits, travel patterns, diet, social life, language, social structure, diseases, spirituality, wars, stories, desires, or art of the blue whale. There are perhaps 10,000 blue whales in the world, living in every ocean on Earth. And of the largest mammal that ever existed, we know very little, but we know this. The animals with the biggest hearts in the world generally travel in pairs, and their dominating, yearning cry, their piercing, yearning tongue can be heard underwater for miles and miles.
So much held in the heart of a life. So much held in the heart of a day, an hour, a moment. We are utterly open with no one in the end. Not mother and father, not wife and husband, not lover, not child, not friend. We open windows to each, but we live alone in the house of the heart. Perhaps we must. Perhaps we could not bear to be so naked for fear of a constantly harrowed heart. When young, we think there will come one person who will savor and sustain us always. When we are older, we know this is the dream of a child, for finally, the heart is bruised and scarred, scored and torn, repaired with will and time, patched by force of character, yet fragile and rickety forevermore, no matter how ferocious the defense or how many bricks you bring to the wall. You can brick up your heart as stout and tight and hard and cold and impregnable as you possibly can, and down it comes in an instant, felled by a woman's second glance, a child's apple breath, the shadow of glass in the roadway, the words, "I have something to tell you," a cat with a broken spine dragging itself into the forest to die, the brush of your mother's ancient papery hands in the thicket of your hair, the memory of your father's voice, early in the morning, echoing from the kitchen, where he is making pancakes for his children.
I am a small writer, a slight man given to writing brief essays in small rooms. I look over the essays I have published over the course of 20 years of diligent scribbling, and I am astonished at their riotous incoherence. Here are some recent subjects: baptism, chickens, kneeling, Plutarch, foxes, dirt, crucifixes, car crushing, anchovies, tigers, summer, the legendary lost memoirs of the late jazz saxophonist Paul Desmond, angels, knives, the Irish hero Cahulan, grace, philately, hell, and silence. If there is a theme in all this, it completely eludes the author, who feels that he has wandered into a pathless forest and is thrashing his way home, armed only with a pen.
Last night the sky was singing. I'll tell you what I heard. 1,000 voices ringing. I couldn't catch the words. Tell me I was dreaming. Say it was the rain. But that's okay, you're right, but I heard singing all the same. Today the earth came dancing, it rose and knocked me flat, as if the ground were stretching and rolling like a cat. I know it was an earthquake, you don't have to tell me that, but still my garden waltzed and spun and left me where I sat. I hear the forest shouting, it does that all the time. Of course the dog was barking, she nearly lost her mind. I could see the raven that was laughing in the trees, but she's convinced that dogs can fly. She thinks a lot like me. You can call me crazy, and you wouldn't be the first. I guess it's not the best thing, but I'll tell you what is worse. I'd rather be crazy if the other road to take holds a soul that sees no beauty and a heart that never breaks. So tonight the sky is singing.
In the hotel, the old nun thinks of Moses, her pet crow. She was young and strong when she found him. He had fallen from his nest in the maple tree and was huddled, broken-boned, groaning in the mud and leaf litter. A new crow is an awkward cake from the bakery of the Lord. All bones and angles, half naked still from the shell, barely feathered at all. She reads aloud to the bird. For weeks, Edmund Burke mostly, and painstakingly teaches him to speak. In the last few minutes, before the old nun died, in her bed, in her room in the old hotel on the top floor, she thought of Moses and everything she loved about him. The way he landed with a plop, the way he craned his head to peer at her, the way he crouched like a small black-feathered weightlifter before jumping into the air. The ornate cast of his mind, his affection for the Psalms, his interest in all languages, the way he gave her the bigger piece of fish when they would split a fish for dinner, the way he dusted the windows and tables with his wings, the way he snorted nasally when he laughed, the time he had a glass of wine and ended up on his back on the grass, both of them giggling helplessly. Oh, the way he never ceased trying to catch insects on the wing, on the theory that he was every bit as talented as any nighthawk or swift or swallow. The way he attacked hawks furiously, calling them dirty names in all his languages, and then crowed ribaldly about it afterwards to his friends. the way he befriended children, gravely. The way he waited outside the library door and hopped in hurriedly when someone came in or out, until the librarian cut a little pet door for him. The way he painted himself white once for her birthday. The way he shouted, "Awake, harp and lyre, I will awaken the dawn," just to see her laugh when they were having breakfast. The way he daintily collected berries in an old baseball cap. The way he posed as a stuffed crow when her mother's superior made her sight visit to her in her room in the hotel. The way he tried to teach pigeons to speak before concluding that stones were smarter than pigeons. The way he studied fishing with herons and skimmers and ouzels and pelicans and herons. The way he flipped and dove dramatically into the ocean just to see her peals of laughter when they were walking the beach. The way he greeted all crows, known and unknown to him, with the words, "Peace be to you." The way they both wept bitterly in the kitchen when she told him that she wanted him to leave, but she wouldn't tell him why, until his grave persistence finally got to her. And she told him that the doctor had told her that she was ill unto death, and she didn't want him to see her shrivel. She wanted to remain always lively and vibrant and herself in his heart. And he must go and never see her again. And that way they will always have each other. Always have this bronze morning, these bronze triangles of toast. This bowl of bronze berries. Her right hand on his left foot. His eyes closed. Her body shivering. The burble of pigeons on the fire escape. The only sound in the room.
As time draws near, my dearest dear, for you and I to part, how little you know the grief and woe in my poor aching heart. Each night I suffer for your sake. You're the one I love so dear. Oh, I wish that I was going with you, or you were staying here. The blackest crow that ever flew will surely turn to white if ever I prove false to you. Bright day will turn to night. Bright day will turn to night, my love. The elements shall mourn if ever I prove false to you. The seas will rage and burn.
I once met a man who was wearing a mattress. He was on the street in front of a mattress store. His name was Benny, and he was the weekend guy. Another guy did weekdays during both rush hours. He happened to be on his lunch break, so he had time to talk to me about what he did. He took a certain pride in his work. "Hey, you take a job like this, you gotta give it your all," he said. "I mean, wearing a bed? You gotta have fun with it or you quit. And I need the money. Hey, I got a kid." Hey. I made $4 an hour as a high school kid in the summer. I do weekends now when I need the extra cash, which I need right now. That's why I'm wearing this. I get $7 an hour now, and you measure it by how many people honk, 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 hey, and laugh, and of course, how many people swing into the store. I figure I'm worth 1 or 2 mattresses a day. Hey, it's not everybody that can say that, right? I count the laughs, though. It's not people being mean is my experience. It's people digging the comedy of it, the goof. I mean, how often you see a mattress walking down the street drinking coffee, you know? Hey.
What writers think at the beginning of any piece of writing? This is the greatest idea ever. I'm a genius. Oh, no one's ever had this idea before. Oh, what a great first line. No one has ever put those words in that order in the whole history of the English language before. Oh, this is so exciting. Being a writer is better than a stick in the eye. This is incredible. This is astounding. Now what?
In my house, which is small and white and wooden, there is a woman, a man, a girl, a shrew, an orange tree, 2 baby boys, 9 spiders, a flock of fruit flies, and several dozen honey ants. The remnants of several hundred that until very recently lived in the basement and made regular forays in orderly lines up the stairs and into the kitchen, where they fastidiously held out for honey and jelly, and adamantly refused the spoonfuls of peanut butter generously proffered them by my daughter, who enjoys their company, and has taken to laying thin lines of honey across the kitchen in lovely patterns, including once a portrait of her father, who watched, awed, daughter in lap, as the lines of his face were populated slowly by ants, hardly bigger than bits of sand. This bit of sweet theater made me think uncomfortably of the way that my face will someday be a highway for invertebrates, when this body is no longer animated by the odd spirit that drives it today. But it also led me to ponder the ways in which my house is a thriving community of creatures, invited and uninvited, all dining on my dollar. Some are there by accident. The shrew fell through an open basement window and landed out on a copy of Edward Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which dazed the shrew, to the surprise of no one who has worked upstream against the cascade of Gibbonian sentences. Ugh. Others, like the spiders and the boys, were born there and have known no other home, and occasionally share the same diet, specifically beetles, which the boys are wonderfully quick at downing. To the dismay, I assume, of the spiders, not to mention the beetles. Thus, we are bound by humor and beetles, by honey and spider silk, and by universal astonishment at the shrew, which could not be tamed, but was turned out into the yard to thin the herd of crickets, which it did with wonderful dispatch, that being the nature of shrews. As it scrabbled away into the brush, I felt a pang of loss, for the shrew was one of us for a time, a stitch in the fabric of our family. And I thought, not for the first time, that we are each threaded to one another by love. Thorough or insufficient, inexplicable and necessary, as ephemeral and savory as lines of honey, as lines on the face of God.
In reply to the question,
Is the soul an organic thing, like eggshells and oranges, so that after we die, we're sort of recycled?
a poem from a girl named Siobhan in 4th grade who continues.
And can you recommend a website?
Well, Siobhan, I say, that is a very excellent question. And my answer is no, I don't know about the website. But yes, when we die, we get recycled, that's for sure. Your organs, if they are still working, you lend them out to someone who needs an eye or kidneys or whatever. And the rest of you either gets cremated and so becomes ash, which I understand is excellent, especially for the roses, or you can be buried and thus turn slowly back into dirt, which, of course, as we know, is also excellent for the roses. It's all about the roses in the end. The class sits silently for a moment. And then Siobhan says firmly,
Now, about the soul, what's the story there? Here we learn that the soul lives forever, can never die, no matter what, and goes to heaven or wherever. What do you say?
I stand silently for a minute, looking at them, their magic faces and vast patient hearts. And I think to myself for the millionth time that blowing smoke on kids is a foul, nasty sin. And I say, Siobhan, you glorious soul, I believe all the way to heaven is heaven. And I believe that who we are never dies, but just changes form. And I believe that we are here for a bright moment between endless darkness. And that grace under duress is just about the coolest thing going. And that learning to love and then loving like crazy is the point, even though that's hard and confusing and painful, and you lose all the time. And in the end, you lose everyone you ever loved, but what a cool ride along the way, don't you think? For a long while, no one wriggles a bit. The teacher agape and the children staring. And then Siobhan, bless her heart, says,
Mister, that was way eloquent. Is that going to be on the test?
What writers think in the middle of a piece of writing. Oh my God, this is drivel. This is the worst muddle that's ever been inflicted on put on a self-inflicted populace. Oh, I should crumble this and go into insurance. I should cease to write forevermore. I should be a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floor of silent seas. Maybe the mariners are on. Oh, I should eat something. Maybe I should take another shower. Oh, who will ever pay for this muck? This is worse than anything Jerzy Kosinski ever wrote. And what could be worse than that? Oh, my gallbladder hurts. I should eat another cookie. Is that the postman? How do you spell labyrinthine? Maybe I should do some laundry. Hey, Ichiro tripled.
One time, years ago, I was shuffling with my children through the vast, wet, moist, thicketed, enormous, webbed, muddy, epic forest on the Oregon coast, which is a forest from 1,000,000 years ago. The forest that hatched the biggest creatures that ever lived on this bruised, blessed earth. All due respect to California and its redwood trees, but our cedars and firs made them redwoods look like toothpicks. And my kids and I were in a biggest creature mood because we had found slugs way longer than bananas and footprints of elk that must have been gobbling steroids. And a friend had just told us of finding a bear print the size of a dinner plate. And all of us had seen whales in the sea that very morning. And all of us had seen pelicans too, which looked like flying pup tents. And how do they know to all hit cruise control at the same time? Does the leader give a hand signal, as my son said? And one of us saw 2 ginormous eagles who lived somewhere in this forest. So, when we found the biggest stump in the history of the world, as my daughter called it, we were not exactly surprised. It was basically totally understandable that suddenly there would be a stump so enormous, it was like someone dropped a dance floor into the forest. That's the sort of thing that happens in this forest. And my kids, of course, immediately leapt up onto it and started shaking their groove things and dancing themselves silly. And I was snorting with laughter until one kid, the goofiest, why we did not name this kid Goofy when we had the chance in those first few dewy minutes of life, I will never know. Well, this kid, of course, shimmed over to the edge and fell off, head over tea kettle, vanishing into a mat of fern almost as tall as me. But the reason I tell you this story is that when we were all down in the moist velvet dark of the roots of the ferns trying to be solicitous about Goofy, and trying not to laugh or whisper the word doofus, one of us found a newt. Oh my God, Dad, check it out. Of course, the newt rattled at the attention, peed on the hands of the kid who held it. And that led to screeching and hilarity. And of course, on the way home, we saw damselflies mating, which also led to screeching and hilarity. But the point of this story isn't pee or lust, however excellent a story about pee or lust would be. It's that one day, when my kids and I were shuffling through the vast, wet, moist forest, we saw so many wonders and miracles that not one of us ever forgot all the wonders and miracles we saw. And we saw tiny shreds and shards of the ones that are there. And what kind of greedy, criminal, thug thieves would we be as a people and a species if we didn't spend every iota of our cash and creativity to protect and preserve a world where kids wander around, gaping in wonder and hoping nothing else rubbery and astonishing will pee on them. You know what I mean?
You could say that I have one theme: story, 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 story. Stories are prayers. Stories are powerful. You should know that I think the great human story is grace under duress, and that laughter is a glorious form of prayer. Sobbing is a form of prayer too. Tears are the salt seas of the heart. And laughter and tears are quite close. They're all related. And that listening with your mouth shut is the secret to literature and seduction. So said my dad, and he had 8 children. So there you go.
The whole division of fiction and nonfiction, all that stuff is all nonsense. Stories, story catching and storytelling, that's the secret to everything. Why do I write? Because I see little stories everywhere, and I like to catch them and show them to other people, much as a child catches a moth and exhibits it with glee to friends and passers-by. Because writing is a form of contemplation and a form of prayer. Because writing occasionally leads to rapture. And because there have been times in my life when the only way I could handle rage and horror and fear was to write it down and thus fend it off, fight it, understand it, force it to retreat. And because, like all human beings, I have an innate drive to leave something shapely and permanent behind me. Some marker of passage through the woods.
Some of us build houses, companies, reputations, tribes of children. Some of us make small essays in small rooms.
I'd like to leave a few books behind me so that someday my children will open and read them and think, maybe the old man had a fastball there for a while. To me, the real reward is to be read. And if someone writes in response, well, then you have been paid in the most valuable of coin. The music of another heart.
He who binds to himself a joy shall this winged life destroy. He that kisses joy himself a joy. Shall this winged life destroy? He that kisses joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise.